Hey guys, what's going on? Jyoti here. I'm here to talk about my wish list for Tekken 7 Season 4. Season 4 is all but confirmed right now, but I'm sure everybody's expecting it. So let's just get right into it. First of all, when it comes to characters, the game's already bloated, but with that mentality, you could say they might as well just add in a whole bunch of more characters because it makes no difference. Preferably, I'd only like one character. If it has to be a guest character, I would have wished it would be Kiryu Kazuma from the Yakuza series, but Harada has gone on record and said that's not really the case. Yeah. If not, I would say Tifa. Tifa is a perfect fit since Final Fantasy VII Remake is doing really good, and I really think that would bring a whole lot of other people to look at Tekken. And at the same time, I also think she's a interesting enough character, and she also fits better in with Tekken than Noctis from season one. In terms of Tekken characters, I think Kunimitsu should come back. Kunimitsu, which you can see now in the background right now, well, it's Yoshimitsu, but it's Kunimitsu's cutscene. And Kunimitsu was really well redesigned in Tekken Tag Tournament 2. However, not many people played Tekken Tag Tournament 2, and she really came into her own. She was her own character and not just a Yoshimitsu clone. However, not enough people played that game, so they didn't really get to see her in action. If you have any doubts regarding that character, I would really recommend you just go and watch a YouTube video to see like experts really use her, and you can really see that a lot of love was put into into the details of her movements, and I think therefore people should be able to re-see her glory again in Tekken 7. So secondly, I want to talk about new modes for this game. A lot of people have really been clamoring for Team Battle, and I think Team Battle should make a return, and it needs to come as a free update. Team Battle should also be offline and online, and I also don't see it as such a big problem to implement. It should really come back. It's a very much requested feature. Next up, what I want to see in modes is there was a mode in Tekken Tag Tournament 1 which had you doing, it was buried in practice mode, and the whole idea was that you'd have randomized moves or strings from characters, and you'd have to execute them under time pressure, and it would be like a random of 10 of them, and you'd try to best your time to always be quicker at executing all of these things. And how this should work for Tekken 7 is that it chooses randomized 10 moves at a time, but from only the character's best 25 moves. So when people come and they want to use that character, they immediately see which are the best moves to utilize in the beginning. This isn't really that interesting for older players, but for newer players such as myself back in Tekken Tag Tournament 1, this was much more interesting than scrolling through a command list, or a move list as it's called in Tekken 7. And I think for newer players this would really ease them in better, especially when they want to try out new characters. As for things like Tekken Force and Ball Mode, I think they should come back with Tekken 8, and as from the get-go, not DLC, from the get-go they should be there. Speaking of Tekken 8, that will merit its own video in the future for its own wish list. Lastly, I want to see not a new mode per se, but the tournament mode get overhauled, the offline tournament mode. It's just too bare minimal. Just that you can press options and pause or anything, I don't think is enough. We should just be able to copy the structure from the online tournament mode and have it online. They should really put it in because some people meet offline, and this would be a real big help for them. So now I want to talk about online. Now online needs its own say here. I mean, since launch the experience has been somewhat subpar for Tekken 7. Well, at least on PS4 it has been. I think it got better within the first few months of Tekken, but compared to Tekken Tag Tournament 2, very lacking. We have these random disconnects, and then everybody knows that, where you had You just start up ranked, you get like a 4 or 5 bar connection, and in 9 out of 10 cases, nobody accepts that match. You start to believe that those things are just fake, make you believe somebody's there when they're actually not. So yeah, random disconnects, matchmaking needs to be improved, but I also want to see a revenge match limit. Now let me explain. It should be something like a best of three or first to two, whereas the incentive is that the person who comes out on top takes more experience than usual, but the loser also doesn't lose more experience than usual. So people have incentives to accept revenge matches, which normally don't, and people who do death matches on end, whereas they're maybe doing that for 30 minutes to an hour till one person gets demoted is somewhat not the case anymore, so that those two people doing that go back into the matchmaking and are available for other people to play with. I also think that the time you spend where you accept matches needs to be shortened from 10 seconds to 7. I mean, if they would even shorten it to 5, I would gladly accept, but 7 is somewhat okay. Less time we spend in the lobbies waiting and more time we fight, the better. So yeah, 7 seconds, it needs to be reduced. Next up are the player lobbies. The player lobbies in general I find are very lackluster, the UI especially. First things first, which needs to be added is slots for people which just want to view. Like, they should be able to, the host should be able to create like 5 slots or so for people who just want to watch, not really participate. You know, they want to see how the pros are playing and learn something. They should be able to like watch. I think that's fine. Next up is just generally how the UI is. I thought the Tekken Tag Tournament 2 looked better despite not playing much mini player matches, but I just think it's not really that intuitive. It needs to be somewhat streamlined and redesigned. And of course, the time acceptance has to be changed. Like, instead of 30 seconds, why the hell does it take 30 seconds? 10 seconds, 7 seconds maybe, just like I suggested for ranked, till somebody accepts a match. On top of that, the host should be able to change the order of who is fighting next, and somebody should also be able to say if they want to skip their turn. Like, maybe he needs to quickly go to the bathroom, or he needs to quickly take care of stuff. Maybe he doesn't even want to fight, he just wants to watch the next match and then afterwards rejoin. I think people should be able to do that. Once again, less time we spend waiting in lobbies and more time we fight or view fighting is much better for Tekken in general and for the community. Now a quick word for the people who are hoping that we get rollback netcode for Tekken 7. Hear me out. It's too late in the game's life cycle to change that. I don't see the whole netcode changing. Plus, rollback has its own disadvantages. And delay-based netcode is fine. Like, anybody who played Tekken Tag Tournament 2, that game netcode definitely rocked, and it was also delay-based. So yeah, for that era, for the PS3 era, that was really impressive, and it's still impressive nowadays. But once again, not that many people play that game. So we can just hope for general improvements for the online and not necessarily a complete overhaul with rollback netcode. So next up is stages. I previously mentioned characters. People also expect new stages. I personally would like to see a kind of Moonlit remix version. Like, you'd have the Tekken 5 variant where you're on the field, and then you'd get kicked off a ledge, and then you'd wind up in the ruins which you'd see in the background, and you'd fight it off like how you did in Tekken Tag Tournament 2. Maybe somewhat changed. It would look really great in this engine, and I also think a lot of people would be really happy with that stage and that music coming back. Yeah. Other stages which should be included are the one which you can actually see already in the background, and that is the classic Akuma Heihachi fight from the story mode, and I really think it should be added because for one it's already in the game, and I think it's really epic how for one the dojo is completely intact, and then they fight, and then this fire engulfs and spreads around. And I can imagine like first round everything's okay, and then in the second round the fire just spreads, starts spreading, and then in the last round it's like everywhere. I think that would really, really be epic. And yeah, that also brings me to the second stage, which I think should be added into the game, and it is once again also in the story mode itself. It's the Alyssa Nina fight somewhere at the beginning in Lee's hideout. It's already in the game. It's kind of small, but as you can see, there's already a kind of fencing at the ledge, and with a bit expansion, it could just be that you balcony break quite early. You can also break the walls at the edges, and you could then, with a bit of work, break the balcony. And they don't even have to get that creative. They could just like get different variants of violet systems at the bottom, and then like palette swap, maybe remove the combots and so in the background, or change that power core in the background to make it look a bit different, but just use the same thing as the next layer of the stage. And then this stage 2 can be implemented into the game, and I think that would be really, really good, and minimal work on the developer's part. Now lastly, point 5 is balance changes. Strictly speaking, I don't want to see massive changes like I did in Season 3. I think people took really long to adjust to the meta, and Season 2 was very well balanced in my opinion. I mean, Season 3 is also now pretty solid as of this version 3.31, as of this recording. However, I still think the Mishima Electric buff should be reverted. I think that is still a bit too crazy. Yeah, but what should happen instead is that their movement is slightly increased. So that means backdash and sidestepping slightly increased. We're not talking about levels of Safina or something, but like that's what Mishimas used to use in prior Tekken games to their advantage, and I don't think then they don't need the other buffs. Now, originally I thought this wasn't an option because Tekken 7 movement was in general nerfed, but then in Season 3 Safina and Fakuram came along, and their movements reminded me a lot of Tekken Tag Tournament 2. Now, as I said, big changes, don't necessarily want to see them. Yeah, we all agree that Fakuram as of this version still needs some adjustments to his hitbox. I still don't know how I feel about him as a character. Leroy could use some slight changes, but once again, I'm not really an expert on Leroy. I don't really find his game plan that interesting. But yeah, I think he could be all around, maybe made a bit more interesting, like what they did to Negan in Season 3 from Season 2. I thought that was very, very cool. But instead of focusing on these little changes or major changes, I think they should be fixing like inconsistencies. Like certain stuff in Tekken is just not really that consistent. The Williams sisters, I've heard their combos are very inconsistent, especially even Anna after all the buffs she got in this regard. And I think there are other characters which also have inconsistencies. Lee from time to time as well. And those are the little things which get patched. Everything else, you know, for the most part, just leave it alone. Because I think it changes the meta too much. I mean, everybody has problems with a certain character which they're nitpicking and maybe they would want to get changed, but I think we should all just learn to deal with it just as of now, instead of having these drastic changes like in Season 3. Yeah, but if there were drastic changes, what I would like to see is a damage reduction across board. Since Tekken 7 started, we've had this damage creep, and there's been a lot of damage to certain characters in general, and it's gotten quite crazy, and I'd like to see kind of a reduction across board. That's if they're making any drastic changes. If not, we just keep it at that. I mean, it's nowhere Tekken Tag Tournament 2 levels, but it is pretty noticeable, and especially newer characters like Leroy on release or Fakuram as we have him right now in 3.31 still do crazy amounts of damage. Like even Leroy now still does crazy amounts of damage, and then a lot of characters got buffs to wall carry, and that of course leads to more damage, and then you have these 10-second rounds partially where everything can be over in a flash. And I think the longer the games last, the more interesting they are. And yeah, so maybe if they were thinking about drastic changes, this would be what they could look at. Not necessarily do, but could look at. Anyway, that's about it for my thoughts on Tekken Season 4. Well, my hopes more or less. And I'd like to hear yours, so leave them in the comments. And then let's see what other people think, how they feel. And yeah, have a nice day and watch out for more content from me. I'm out.